What if you want to start a story with a dramatic scene, where a brother's carrying his sister who's on the verge of death through the snow, desperately trying to save her? You could have the characters say stuff like this. Or this. And while that does give the audience a lot of the information they need to know, I prefer exposition that looks like this. The subtle kind. That's snuck between all these different layers. Like the relationship between two characters. Or stakes. There's this video that just came out the other day from Thomas Flight titled In Praise of Great Exposition. It's an outstanding video that I'm choosing to closely emulate in this one. It touches on so many different nuanced aspects of great exposition. So when thinking through this week's video, I found myself returning to episode 7 of Frieren Beyond Journey's End and watching the new episode of Demon Slayer, which was the season finale of the Hashira training arc. And I was shocked at the difference in the way they approached exposition. Welcome to this week's episode of a running series called Exploring Frieren. My name is Pei, and today we're talking about how sometimes good exposition is hidden in the crowd. So this Thomas Flight video is great, and while it's absolutely inspiration for this video, and I'm definitely yoinking a lot of different aspects of his structure, my goal is primarily to build off of the argument he's already made, using my own examples, specifically talking about Demon Slayer and Frieren. This video is a weird result of my own actions matching up with all these different unique things that were released at the same time. The first of those three things is obviously Thomas Flight's video. The second is a video I released about a half week before then talking about backstory and flashbacks. And finally, the third is that today Demon Slayer's new season just released its finale. We're eventually going to get to the point where I explain how all three of those things are directly related. But first, let's understand each of them individually. So skipping the Thomas Flight video for now, last week I released a video talking about backstory and the 4 different ways in which you can talk about backstory in any piece of fiction: exposition, information, inference, and flashbacks. And the video was primarily built around that 4th idea, flashbacks. So I was surprised when just a couple days later, Thomas Flight released a great video on exposition. A quick correction from future Pei editing the video, Thomas Flight's video actually came out a day before mine. Just thought I'd specify. I've been rewatching Frieren for this series, going episode by episode and trying to come up with unique ideas to talk about. Now in the 7th episode of Frieren, there's this remarkable scene that's only a couple minutes long. The purpose of the scene is definitely to provide exposition, but that's not the only thing it did. It explored a cool little moment that touches on a central theme of the story. It called back to previous relationship dynamics while highlighting new ones. And it gave us crucial information, directly related to our main character, which makes it easier for the scene to be compelling and engaging, because it's providing other interesting things to engage in besides just the exposition. Whereas in juxtaposition, I just finished the new season of Demon Slayer, and while I find myself consistently coming back to the show and my intention is not to ruthlessly criticize it, I do believe that Demon Slayer is a show that's predominantly carried by its beauty and hype. In other words, everything goes to the wayside in pursuit of those two things, and the writing is often very weak. But also, despite how many times I've almost quit watching it, I consistently find myself coming back because it's fun. But I don't think Demon Slayer's writing is its strong suit. And where that's most obvious is in this entire last arc and this last episode. Without spoiling anything specific, throughout this entire season, and especially in the finale, there's a huge amount of exposition that doesn't really serve any other purpose besides providing information that the audience has yet to find out. Like 3/4 of the entire finale, which is 40 minutes by the way, is spent just giving the audience tons of information through dialogue. So all 3 of these things actually made me realize that I really wanted to talk about exposition this week. Let's go back to that Thomas Flight video. There are a couple really important points he made that I'll be going over that I think all point towards this idea that layered exposition can be an incredibly effective way of giving the audience all sorts of information they need without it feeling heavy-handed or forced. For example, when he's praising the exposition in Blade Runner, he points towards suspense, dramatic stakes, mysterious setting, and implied information as all components that made for more compelling storytelling. Because that scene in Blade Runner is multifaceted, while feeling natural. Which is the second point I'm going to talk about with Thomas Flight's video. Exposition can so often feel heavy-handed and forced, so if you can find more natural ways that feel realistic to the audience to show important information, it'll make for a better scene. And finally, the last of Thomas Flight's points that I want to talk about is how sometimes showing and telling can be misunderstood. Specifically that telling can be a form of showing, if you apply inference. His examples from Breaking Bad, where the main character's son complains to his father that the hot water heater is still not working and he's asked multiple times to replace it, implying that there's financial struggles going on within the family. And while on one hand it felt like a natural conversation that the characters would be having, it also implies things about the relationship between the two characters and each of their personalities. Once again, multifaceted, which is ultimately what I'm arguing, that exposition in most situations comes best layered, placed in scenes where there's many different purposes being served. That was the problem with Demon Slayer's exposition, is they kept giving us all these important answers we've been waiting for a long time, but couldn't have taken up those 30 minutes of the finale while also serving another purpose? Let's look at a scene from Frieren that does a lot of those things Thomas Flight pointed out well. So this scene's primary purpose is to set up an arc exploring the main monster of the series, or said better, the remnants of the big bad, the monster that threatened the sanctity of the world. Frieren is a story that takes place after the big hero's adventure, where her old party took down the Demon King. This scene is meant to give more information surrounding demons, and part of what makes this scene so good outside of the great exposition and the remarkable flashback that follows afterwards, is how much depth there is to be explored in a lot of the little moments. So what I'm referring to really is predominantly one scene when Frieren is locked up in a cell, but also the moment that precurses that. The reason Frieren gets arrested is because she's in a busy, populated city when she does the magical equivalent of dropping her bag and pulling out a gun. The first thing that makes this interesting is Frieren as a character before this is incredibly carefree, one that constantly undermines threats and risk as a highly capable mage. So to have her take such sudden and drastic actions implies a lot. The next thing that's really fun is as she's being arrested, she doesn't resist at all. It's also fascinating how her two party members react. Fern, who's been traveling with her for a while, doesn't give much of a reaction at all, which is shocking for Stark as a new member of the party. It also plays on the fact that Fern has now acclimated to all the unique circumstances that come with Frieren's long life and her unique personality. It both hits a comedic beat and offers depth. Next, we jump to Frieren, now bored in the dungeon. Fern and Stark come down to visit her, and we see that expanded on. Fern shares with Frieren that she's going to be locked away for 2 to 3 years. So when Frieren says, "Oh, only 2 to 3 years? I expected it to be longer," Fern noticeably reacts, which refers to both a former conflict between Frieren and Fern in episode 2, and the overarching theme of the story, which is Frieren learning to value both hers and others' time more. Stark is obviously perplexed, which plays well for comedic timing, but the entire time we're secretly learning all these things about demons, and more specifically Frieren's relationship with them. This all sets up a flashback that sets the tone for the rest of the arc, but the scene does so much more. There is conflict in both Frieren's arrest and the reaction that prompted it. There's relationship dynamics going on between all 3 party members. And more than anything, the comedy and conversation all lends itself to more natural circumstance. So when Frieren explains herself, it feels really warranted and not forced. It's what makes Frieren so special as a show. It's capable of taking all these oversaturated, overused storytelling tools and expertly blending them in a way that feels natural. The things that make Frieren as a show so special are kind of easy to miss, but the more you pay attention, the more I think you'll be surprised at how much is actually there. That's why I keep talking about this show so much and using it as an example to explore such interesting ideas. From philosophy and morals to storytelling structure, Frieren is a remarkable example of what a story can do, because this scene so perfectly sets up and gives you the information to really enjoy the remainder of the arc, which is the whole point of exposition. Give the audience information they need to know. But it doesn't hurt if it's layered really well. Thanks for watching. A special shout out to Thomas Flight for making a great video that inspired this one. I was far from subtle in emulating his style. This is the 12th video of a running series called Exploring Frieren. If you enjoyed this one, consider going and checking out any of the other ones. And like always, I'll see you next week.